Thank you for Patreon now for donating to the Patreon.
Hey guys, it's Meteor. So back again with the Card Fight Vanguard deck profile. If you guys enjoyed, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and down to the Patreon. Let's get started. Today we have Brandt Gate, Gravidia. Gravidia is an interesting one. Originally, before set 4, Gravidia felt consistent. Felt like it could nuke a board pretty easily. I don't know if it's just me, because it's not just when I play this deck, it's when other people seem to play this deck. Maybe it's just that the deck is built weirdly, I guess, but this deck feels a lot less consistent in comparison to the old one. And the differences are, yeah, the newer cards were teched in, but also the trigger change. So, and when I say trigger change, I mean the types of triggers, not the amount of said triggers. So let's go ahead and get this deck started, and then you can tell me if you understand the problem with this deck without me having to tell you. First up, our starter today is Gravidia Dellen. 6k base, grade 0 boost, 5k shield. The best looking card on this deck in my opinion. Auto when it's road upon, if you went second, draw a card. Nothing too special about it. Standard starter build. You do not need to run this as your starter. But do you run this as your starter? If you want to do a whole Gravidia ride line, you do, and that's the end of story for that one. So one copy of Dellen. Over trigger. Star Dragon Deity of Infinitude. Eldobreath. The thing I hate the most, especially when Mandala says, manifest my destiny, and then this thing pops up at the top of the deck and kills me. Grade 0. Boost. 50k shield. 5k power. Over trigger. You may have one over trigger in your deck. When it reveals a trigger, remove that card, draw a card, choose one of your units, it's supposed to be melee for the turn. If revealed during your draft check, activate additional effect. Activate its additional effect, which is double the power and critical of all your former units until end of turn. Increases to double power and critical when activated. So you get a draw, someone gets a million, and then if you got this during your drive check, you double whoever got that million, and then you double their critical as well, so most likely double crit, 2 million, and then you also have to remember the rest of your front row's a thing. So, you know, if they take any of your attacks that turn, they're essentially dead, unless they're playing greed on, but that involves them being at 0 damage at the start of this turn. So, Eldobreath is definitely really good, increases your critical and power to such huge extents, and makes this deck hit for big numbers. Like, normally, I would argue Obari is better, but then when Gravidia can double your trigger effects, and while, yes, having 2 rear guards that swing for 2 million is a lot, or 1 rear guard that can swing for 4 million, this one can make your rear guards grand, and not all of them swing for the millions, but the 2 rear guards will probably swing for the millions, and everyone has at least 4 crits on them. So, yeah, Eldobreath's better in this case. 1 copy of Eldo. Trigger lineup, besides the over trigger. 3 copies of Ameliorate Connector. Grade 0 boost, 5k shield, 4k base. Draw a trigger, continues guard circle. If your opponent's vanguard grade 3 good, it gets plus 5k shield. Okay, 10k shield. I don't know why. I did run a draw trigger before this at 3, but then after teching this thing in, I have seen more draw triggers than usual, even though the amount of draw triggers hasn't changed, just what the draw trigger is. So that's questionable, but it still works, I guess. It is also the one trigger that hasn't betrayed me yet, so 3 copies of the draw trigger because it hasn't screwed me over yet. 4 copies of the thing that keeps screwing me over, Cardinal, Draco, Enpyro. 4k base, 15k shield, grade 0 with boost. Front trigger continues guard circle. If your opponent's vanguard's grade 3 or greater, it gets plus 5k shield. Listen, fronts, okay, I love you giving me shield, but I need crits to kill my opponent. Fronts don't do anything when the opponent can just either PG or throw down a good chunk of hand, or like throw down 2 hand cards. Crits are far more valuable. Please give me crits to drive check. I keep the fronts for the shield, but if they make a crit with a 5k shield, I'm immediately getting rid of this. 4 of. And then finally, we have 4 of Patrol, Robo, Dekarcop, the thing I literally never call and I never will call. Grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 4k base. Critical trigger, auto rear. At the end of the battle that it boosted, put it to soul, choose one of your units, extra plus 2 for the turn. Okay, it's a joke when I say I don't call this. I typically do call it, but I never use its skill because I always forget to. And that's a skill with all of them, which is why for a lot of my decks, I still run the critical triggers with 1k more power. Because in with a card that I always forget the skill of, what's more important? Using a vanilla which has 1k less power, which means I might not hit magic numbers, or using a card that has 1k more power, even if it's a vanilla, but will always hit a magic number? Obviously, I'm going to go with the latter between the two. The only reason I run it in this deck is because the deck has so much of a soul problem that on rare occasions it has a soul problem, but on the rare occasions where I remember to use this, I will hopefully use it to save myself. 4 copies of Dekarcop, if I ever used it. And then 4 copies of Cardinal, Prima, Nabilem, grade 0, boost 15k shield, 5k base. Standard heal trigger, nothing special about it. You just get a heal, power. That's all there is to it. 4 of. And then we have our grade 1s. First up, we have the PG in Violate Dragon. Grade 1, boost, 0 shield, 6k base. Continuous Sentinel, you may have up to 4 Sentinels in your deck, and auto, when it's placed on guard circle, choose one of your units, it cannot be until end of battle. And if your hand has 2 or more cards, choose a card from your hand and discard it. If you don't know what that means if this and only one other card is in your hand when you place it down on guard circle, you don't have to discard 4, which is really nice. That means you can be as aggressive as you want with this deck, and as long as you still have one PG in hand, you are good with defensives. And that's really nice in this deck. Especially when for some reason my triggers like to flock to my hand and everything else is not a normal unit, so I kind of have to rely on the PG to save me when I have to call triggers. So 4 copies of Violate because he does help me, especially with my luck in this deck, because I don't think, regardless of how I ran this, I don't think that would stop the triggers from swarming my hand. 4 of. Then we have our only other grade 1. Yes, there are only a grand total of 7 grade 1s, and one of them does go in the right deck. 3 copies, 2 in the main deck, 1 in the right deck, of Gravidia Wells are grade 1. Grade 1, boost, 5k shield, 8k base. Also, I love this thing's background, but I hate the card itself. Auto, when it's placed on Vanguard Circle, look at the top 7, choose any number of meteorites from among them, reveal them, put them to your hand, and shuffle your deck. So you can add the grade 2, you can add the grade 1 meteorite, you can add either of the 2 if they ever make a grade 3 meteorite, which I know they're going to do eventually. You can add those to hand, and then it's a free search of any number, which is really nice. And act rear guard once per turn if your Vanguard is Gravidia Nordlinger, so specifically the grade 3. You see, now it's starting to make me wonder, if they're always going to name restrict something, that has to mean that it's going to get a grade 4. Now, here's what happens. If they don't tell us beforehand that we're going to get a grade 4 for any of the other decks, but then I see a card of support come by that only says the name, like the archetype or like whatever it's called, but not the full name. Like, for example, if Eugene got support, it doesn't say Heavy Artillery of Duststorm Eugene, it just says Eugene. I'm assume they're going to put a grade 4 in that set, and they just haven't told us. If they do that, and they name restrict, they don't fully name restrict, they just archetype restrict it, or grade 3 name restrict it, then I believe that they will give us a grade 4. Either way, so best one, choose up to 2 meteorites from your hand, put them into your order zone, and this unit gets plus 2 for the turn. So 2k is not that much, but 2k is still a good amount, and it gets you a free 2 orders. So you get hits for magic numbers, which is good, and nets you 2 orders for free, which if you play the grade 1 meteorite, it can just soul charge 1. If you play them twice, then it's just a soul charge 2, so effectively you're just getting a plus 2 and a soul charge of 1. 3 copies of Gravidia Wells, because the 1 in the right deck you obviously use to search meteors, and the 2 in the main deck you use to abuse the crap out of the meteors that get stuck in your hand. So 3 of, 2 in the main deck, 1 in the right deck. Then we move on to our other orders, or to our orders. Yes, we move on to the orders. First up, 4 copies of Falling Hellhazard. For some reason, I kept the old order towards the back, so we're going to have to wait to see that one. So we're just here this Meteor first. Grade 2, set order. After a set order is played, it goes to order zone. Continuous, when you would count the number of meteorite cards put from your order zone into drop zone for the cost of your Vanguard's ability, this card counts as 2. So cool, if you don't know what Gravidia Nordlinger does, she involves sending 5 orders to drop, so 2 of these count towards 4 of those, and then you just need 1 other order. And then auto, when it's put into your drop from the order zone, doesn't matter whose order zone, so you can just play this with Prison and then give it to them via Razat Pink and then take it out, and then the effect still goes off. Bind this card from your drop and then choose one of your opponent's rear guards to kill it. Okay, we can all agree that the second effect, we all know why the second effect is there, but we can all agree the second effect is shit. And honestly, I don't think this card is that good. Like, I do run it because it is easier to hit, like, the 5 meteor threshold, but even when I see other people play this card doesn't really do much, because after you use it, like, once it hits the order zone, it's effectively useless afterwards. Like, before it hits the order zone, it's effectively useless, and then once it gets out of the order zone, it's also effectively useless. So you're playing 4 dead cards, and the only time it has any use is when it's in the order zone. If you can't get it into the order zone, granted your main Vanguard does it, it's effectively useless. So, like, it's added consistency towards Nordlinger's skill, but it feels like this card is a more minus to the deck than it is a plus for me. I still run it because the first ability is okay, but honestly, I think the deck would work better without it. But for a Falling Hellhazard, in case you really think that 2 extra cards makes a difference, when, at least during my test playing, it didn't really make that much of a difference. Hell, it was actually going worse with most of them. Then we have 3 copies of Gravidia Stanner. Yes, I know, the grade 1 order is towards the back of the slides. I'm sorry, I forgot about it. Anyways, grade 2, intercept, 5k shield, 10k base. Continuous rear guard circle. If your drop and order zone has a total of 5 or more orders, gets plus 5k power and 5k shield. Active on both players' turns. So 15k power and 10k shield. Cool for an intercept. Cool for a slightly hard to hit rear guard. Weirdly enough, that actually comes in so helpful against, especially with this deck where you can just start killing rear guard. So you can just kill the boosters and then they eventually have to either call an extra card to swing into it or they just have to bank on triggers. So 3 copies of Stanner because a 15k that's kind of like not impossible but hard to kill because whatever they try killing it with, it typically dies before it hits the board. It's kind of fun. It makes your opponent waste attacks on rear guards that there's no point in swinging into. 3 copies of Stanner. 3 copies of Gravidia Shergo, the sole reason why this says bind instead of keep and drop. Grade 2, intercept, 5k shield, 10k base. Act, rear guard, once per turn. Soul Blast 2, choose up to 5 meteorites from your drop zone, return them to deck and shuffle it. If you return 1 or more cards until end of turn, this card gets plus 5. If you return 3 or more, it gets plus 5. If you return 5 or more, also gets plus 5. So if you return 5, it gets plus 15. Okay, Soul Blast 2 isn't really what I find ideal in this deck, so already we're off to a problem. But then the meteorite shuffling. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Except with the people I've seen play meteorites, and granted that's very few people, Shergo never comes in handy when it needs to. It goes off, but it never comes in handy when it needs to. So like, yeah, it prevents you from decking out. Yes, it can get you meteors back, which is why I run it, but quite literally, this thing is kind of like Kokabeel for me, where it has a use, but then I have an alternative use for it, which is discard fodder. Quite literally, this card never shows up in my hand, and on the rare occasions it does, it's better used as discard fodder for ride deck than it is used as a called card. That's this thing's purpose in this deck. Does using it as discard fodder mean it's bad? No, far from it. Me using Kokabeel as discard fodder, that didn't mean Kokabeel was bad. That just meant there was nothing willing I want to discard, and Kokabeel in my deck really consistent. Running Shergo as discard fodder gives me a discard target, which I didn't have before. So yes, Shergo makes the deck slightly more consistent. Is it the type of consistency that I want? No. Is it consistency that I need? Debatable, but it helps in an alternative purpose. That's what it does. 3 copies. And then our last grade 2 is our main grade 2 and the 1 copy that goes in the ride deck of Gravidia Barringer. The thing that you get screwed over by if you fail to hit a Meteor from Wells and or your 5 hand cards. Grade 2, intercept, 5k shield, 10k base. Auto ones placed on van or rear. If you have a Meteorite in your order zone, Soul Blast 3, draw a card, and this you get plus 5 for the turn. Okay, it sucks if you can't draw into a Meteorite for this, because 1, Wells does give you a top 7, but there is a rare occasion that you will not hit a Meteor, and if you don't, unless you have a Meteor in hand, you're screwed, because this requires 3 soul. You will not have 3 soul when you ride this if you don't get a Meteor out, unless you have an alternative soul charger. But also, because it requires a Meteor in order zone, even if you have those 3 soul, you wouldn't be able to use it, which sucks. But you know, 95% of the time that ability is going to go off, so free draw and plus 5. Granted, the soul does put you behind a bit, so no early rush for you, but still a pretty good card. And continuous rear guard, if your drop and order zone have a total of 5 or more set orders, gets plus 5 active during both players' turns as well. So the turn you place it, if you have 5 or more orders, gets plus 20. Okay, that's cool. Decent card. Not horrible, except, you know, Soul Blast of 3, while that draw is really nice, and the only, or like one of the very few grade 2 I can think of that's Vanguard ability is also a rear guard ability. Keep this in the ride deck. I mean, if you really want to get rid of Shergo, go for it. I won't talk shit at all and do it, because I honestly believe that's something you could do, but I do think Barbringer is just better served in the ride deck. So 1 copy of her. Then on to grade 3s. 3 copies of Gravidia Barracuda, or if I actually try to say its name, Bacubirito. Grade 3, 200, Persona Ride, 13k base. Auto one is placed on rear guard from anywhere. Soul Boss 1, choose a Meteorite from your drop, put it to order zone. Cool! The other reason why this thing says bind, because otherwise you can just keep looping it. And continuous rear guard during your turn. If your opponent's rear guard's retired this turn, gets plus 5. If you retire 3 or more, gets plus 1 crit. Okay. That does nothing. That does... Okay, the 5k is always going to go off unless they genuinely give you no rear guards that can be killed. But the extra crit, I cannot tell you how many times I have used Bastion against this, because half the time I don't even play Gravidia. I play Bastion, Burst, I play all the Trial decks, and I play everything. Basically, I play everything that isn't Gravidia and Greedon at I think Flagberg, more or less, and Hex Orb at that. But I mean, I still play all of them. I just played those ones significantly less compared to the other ones. But that ability never goes off. And it's not like me playing conservatively makes the deck worse. Far from it. Bruce can kick this thing's ass easy without calling rear guards. I've done it on several occasions just because Bruce can hit ungodly numbers. I mean, yeah, the newer Bruce did tech down the deck's power capabilities a bit. It makes it slightly harder to kill Gravidia, but it's not like it made it that much worse. Bastion, I don't even need to talk about. Magnolia, okay, Magnolia against, you'd think the deck that would die to a field nuke would die to this. No, Magnolia Elder has like almost a near perfect win streak against this deck. Like, so do all, like, most of my decks have a near perfect win streak against Gravidia in general, regardless of whose build we're talking about. But Magnolia has just the best one because I think that a deck that relies on calling a board half the time can still be a board wiping deck. It's just amazing. And Seraph Snow, I don't need to talk about Seraph Snow. Seraph Snow does fine because like the Meteorites kind of counteract Seraph Snow more or less. But and then Nirvana slaps this in the face. But like Barracuda, I love the idea behind it. The extra crit in the 5k. I genuinely do think that is good. Except like against any deck, like against the 5 Trow decks in particular, and yeah, against other decks, something like Flagberg, maybe this does something against. Half the decks, you don't even need to call 3 rear guards for them to be good. You call 3 rear guards, just take for bigger numbers. Like the argument of not running Persona Rides. It doesn't mean you don't need them. It just means that it doesn't mean Persona Rides are bad. It just means you don't need them. Like, not running a Persona Ride Nirvana doesn't mean Nirvana gets bad all of a sudden. My Nirvana deck worked perfectly fine without Persona Rides. Honestly, it worked better. So, like, 3 copies of this thing, because, the 5k extra crit, it helps in theory. It's just that half the time, no one calls 3 rear guards for this to be counted as validly useful, or at least if you're playing against me, you're not going to see this go off as much as you think it will. The only time you're going to get extra crits off that is if you drag check a crit or the over. And then our last grade 3 and our last normal unit before we get onto the order I messed up. 4 copies, 3 in the main deck and 1 in the ride deck, of Gravidia Nordlinger. Grade 3, Twin Jet, Persona Ride, 13k base. Auto, when it's placed on Vanguard Circle, search your deck for up to 2 Meteorite cards of any grade, put them into Order Zone and shuffle your deck. Cool, so their abilities go off, so if you play Neatness Meteor Shower, you get their effects off, and if you play Hellhazard, it's a free search, so that's cool. And Auto Vanguard, when it swings, counterblast 1, put 1 or more Meteorites from your Order Zone to drop, and until end of battle, this unit gets plus 15, regardless of what you put. If you put 3 or more Meteorites, it gets plus 1 crit, and if you put 5 or more, it gets to activate trigger effects twice, which means your over trigger, you go draw check the over trigger, plus 1,000,000 in a draw, and then your front row doubles their power and criticals. Then you do the whole thing again, so you draw again, you plus 1,000,000 again, you double, and all of that stuff. So she's really good with overs because she breaks them immensely. The double crit is amazing. The 28k is amazing, especially when your opponent's at grade 2, and you can just do that for no apparent reason. It's really good, really simplistic. Honestly, this card is amazing. My only thing that I feel like holds this deck back is just like the amount of meteors you need to be consistent with. Like, that's my one thing, because I've seen different builds, and every time it just feels like the deck doesn't work consistently. That's my opinion on it. That doesn't mean the deck is bad. It's just how I feel about Gravidia. If it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's bad. That doesn't mean shit. That's my opinion on it. You have your own opinion. The world has its own opinion about how good Gravidia is. Who cares? Anyways, 3 copies of Gravidia Nordlinger in the main deck because she is actually really good. The Persona Rides do help with numbers, especially because if you don't see triggers, she actually does it for as low as numbers of Seraph Snow. Just the only difference is the Vanguard has slightly more pressure in its own right, and the one in the ride deck, because let's be fair, the more you ride this, the more orders you can search, which is really nice. And then our last card, which is our grade 1 order, which I think is objectively better than the grade 2 order. Neatness Meteor Shower. After set orders play, put in the order zone. Continues if you may have to 16 copies of this in your deck. But what reason was there for this? 11 worked perfectly fine with this deck. And I still run 12 orders. I actually increased the amount of meteorites, and somehow the deck got worse in consistency. I would like for you to explain to me how 16 is a good idea. And then auto, when it's put into order zone, you may soul charge 1. If it was put via Vanguard's ability, draw a card. Cool, so put it in by its own effect, put it in by Barracuda's over their effect, put it in there by Wells' effect, you get a soul charge, and via the other 2 that isn't Nordlinger, you effectively just put in the order zone for free. And if you put it in there by Nordlinger, you get a draw out of it. And auto, when it's put into order zone, when it's put into your drop from order zone, kill one of your opponent's rear guards. So, free kill, doesn't cost binding, so you can shuffle back with Shergo if you ever used her, get you a draw on soul charge, and as my friend Mandala goes, you got to deck thin to deck win, which means every time that ability can go off, use it to its full extent. You soul charge as much as possible, you draw as much as possible. That's how this deck works. And it somehow always kills me. But honestly, Neatness Meteor Shower, the best looking card in this deck in my opinion, minus Dellen, I guess. And get you a free kill, draws you a card, and soul charges one. Definitely really good. And just in terms of art, I feel like these two should have switched skills, but it's still fine. And that's it for the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed. I know I typically go with like a more broader aspect of it, or like a more happiest aspect of the deck. And yeah, I do have somewhat of a grudge against Gravidia, and it is my least favorite deck coming out of D. Like, in terms of aesthetic, one of my favorites, or not one of my favorites, but not my least favorite. But in terms of like actual gameplay, I don't know why. The deck just doesn't feel good. Whether it's my deck or someone else's deck I see, or just someone else playing the deck, it doesn't seem like that good. Now, if Gravidia is good in tournaments and competitive play, that's fine and all. But like, we all know these decks are for casual games, right? Like that's how it is in the end. And like, this deck isn't really fun to me in particular. It's fine playing against because I enjoy the challenge of seeing an over trigger come out and then the extra criticals to everyone. But just playing the deck itself isn't that fun to me. If you're a Gravidia main, roast me in the comments for all you want, but honestly, this deck is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Maybe it's just my perspective of the deck, but either way, it's a good deck. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, donate to the Patreon, join Discord, follow Twitch, and I'll see you on the next one. Don't forget to stand up your vanguards.